She's president of Nebraskans Against Gun Violence. That is an organization which has helped defeat the National Rifle Association's top priority bill for 4 years running in the unicameral.
Yes.
And for your information, that oft-defeated bill is a firearm preemption bill that would wipe out all of Nebraska's local gun laws. And this is a truly amazing feat because 43 other states have already passed just such a bill, and the only ones left that haven't are 6 flaming blue states with low gun death rates and Nebraska. This year, Nebraskans Against Gun Violence organized a boycott of bank accounts worth millions of dollars to prompt First National Bank of Omaha to disassociate from the NRA. After First National Bank broke ties with the NRA, corporations around the country followed suit in a cascade of anti-NRA sentiment, all started by Nebraskans Against Gun Violence. That now includes many other financial and insurance firms, airlines, hotel chains, car rental companies, health-related industries, and more, all following in this boycott. Amanda is an outspoken critic of the gun industry and has written about gun culture and policy for both Salon and the New Republic. Last month, after she staged a protest to shame NRA's chief lobbyist, Chris Cox, the NRA sent her a no trespass letter, warning her that she can never set foot in their headquarters or she's going to be arrested. And interestingly, she's never actually been there in person. More recently, NRA attorneys have submitted multiple legal requests to the University of Nebraska for any emails in which Amanda or others discuss her activism. That's how scared they are of Amanda Gailey and grassroots volunteers like her who speak truth to power. Amanda is also an associate professor of English at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where she teaches American literature and fights for academic freedom. She's working on a book about gun control and higher education, and she is going to talk to us now. Thank you, Amanda.
My daughter is here to be my slide flipper through her, and they already have a technical problem. How do we make it show up on?
There's
probably a mirror.
You need to go to
Monitor, isn't it? Where's this monitor?
we need to show the slideshow on the screen.
While they were working on that, when I was listening to the amazing recollections of Virginia, it was striking to me that, of course, Oliver North, who was so instrumental in fighting the revolution, was just last week named the new president of the National Rifle Association.
Oh, really?
They're shameless.
Wow.
And you know, people say, oh, I'm so angry he's the president, or I'm so angry that Ted Nugent is on the board, and I say, let them show everyone who they are. Let them have that person as their president. So, I was also going to pass around, the talk I'm going to give you today is about trying to sort of refocus and think about U.S. gun laws, taking a step back, looking at how they're structured, who's harmed by them, who's helped by them, and where we can best direct our energy both in fighting the gun lobby and asking for better gun policy. When I was in the D.C. area a few weeks ago, my friend Catherine, who lives in Roanoke, drove up to meet me, and we made t-shirts that said, "The Great American Gun Melt." We just decided to call ourselves something. Yeah, that would be great. Let's just take a look at. And one of the things that we did, we were thinking, you know, when someone harms a child, often when they're released from prison, there's a notification sent out to the community, right, that there's a predator in the community. There are laws requiring this. But when someone makes their entire luxurious living off of the constant harming of children, they just get to live in a mansion and hobnob with the most powerful, wealthy individuals in our country. So we printed out a gun predator community notice. And in that notice, we have a photograph of Chris Cox, who is the chief lobbyist of the National Rifle Association. It's been him who's been pushing all of these pernicious policies. If you've recently seen any of their propaganda where they talk about the media or shooting liberals like coyotes on sight, and all of this, us against them, you can't sell hunting rifles anymore, so you have to sell human hunting rifles. You have to convince your base that they have to turn on everyone who's not like them with arms. He's the one behind all of that. He's their chief lobbyist. And so we stood on the very busy traffic light intersection near his home with his armed security behind us. They called out the police on us multiple times. And we handed these out to pedestrians as they walked by to let them know that an apex gun predator lives in their city. He was so infuriated by this that as soon as I got back to Lincoln, I got the no trespass order that Karen mentioned, saying that I am to never, ever, ever, never set foot at the National Rifle Association headquarters, and it said, your presence is not welcome here, something, something, something. So I wrote them back, and I said, your presence is not welcome in our schools. Your presence is not welcome in our nightclubs. Your presence is not welcome in our communities. And I added, P.S., nobody wanted to see your headquarters anyway. Everyone knows they smell like Ted Nugent. So it's on. Chris Cox and I are not friends. Alexandria, Virginia. Yes. Okay. So I've been thinking about gun violence for a long time, and I'm currently working on a book project that sort of talks about just exactly what this gun stuff is doing in America these days. Like, what is its kind of like cultural, political purpose? Because it's such a unique and bizarre thing that we have going in the United States. Our peer nations are baffled by why we let this happen, right? So, as a scholar, my kind of critical or theoretical orientation is a biopolitical one, where I like to ask, in what way does a particular policy or law or custom benefit, amplify the health, wealth, longevity of some portion of the population and oppress another, exterminate another, terrorize another? And that's the kind of orientation that I'm approaching gun culture, gun policy through, and that's what I want to talk about today, is that we spend a whole lot of time looking at little individual pieces on the ground, like, oh, we need better background checks, or we need to ban bump stocks, right? Of course, I agree with both of those, but that's not even a fraction of what we need, right? So I want to take a step back and look from a bird's eye perspective of how gun policy is generally oriented in the United States. Who is it benefiting through health, wealth, social power? Who is it oppressing, exterminating, terrorizing? So I hope that some of you are familiar with Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. Have you guys read that? Good, yes. And in a nutshell, if you're not, right, she has this great concept that she talks about called preservation through transformation. And what that means is that there are entrenched abuses of power in our culture, in any culture. And what tends to happen is that when society finally figures out that something is immoral or strikes a lot of people as wrong, they can abolish a massive injustice. But the underlying power structures, greed for power, abuse that led to that problem initially doesn't disappear. It dissipates into other places. So by the time the United States finally generally agreed that slavery was horrific and abolished slavery, that did not make entrenched endemic racism go away. It made it remanifest through Jim Crow. By the time we realized, through a lot of pain and sacrifice and activism, that Jim Crow was an abomination, and we made it go away, the underlying power structure behind that evil did not disappear. She says instead, it has remanifested in what she calls the new Jim Crow, which is the war on drugs, right? It's a structuring of our laws, our justice system, so that it disproportionately profits off of black and brown bodies by criminalizing at astronomically disproportionate rates the behaviors of certain communities, shortens their lifespans, incarcerates them, and also derives wealth for other people out of those actions, right? And that's what she calls the new Jim Crow. And it's my belief that a kind of unspoken major way that we are enacting that new Jim Crow is through U.S. gun policy. And so I'm going to talk about that. Could you flip to the next slide? Thank you. So I think the best way to get at this is I want to talk about a specific case. I chose this case for two reasons. One is that it happened in Nebraska, in Lincoln. And the other one is that it is such an everyday, boring gun violence incident that probably most of you don't remember it. So it's the kind of thing that happens countless times every year. So on September 22nd, 2015, a Lincoln police officer was kind of on the lookout for an 18-year-old young man named Tariq Ortiz, who had fled a traffic stop about a month or a couple weeks before that. And I think he suspected him of dealing drugs or having some kind of drugs on him. So he was on the lookout for Tariq Ortiz. Sure enough, he saw him in the back seat of a car in the street he was patrolling. So he pursued the car, pulled the car over, and this was, if you're familiar with Lincoln, right about 2 blocks from the Capitol. So he approached the car, started to ask the passengers to get out. And Tariq Ortiz, who it would turn out had some cocaine on him and a handgun, freaked out. So he got out of the car and took off running. Well, if you run away from the police 2 blocks from the Capitol in Lincoln, there's plenty of backup, right, within a quick response time. So a whole bunch of other officers responded. Witnesses report that at some point a handgun fell out of Tariq Ortiz's pants onto the ground. He fumbled, picked it up, kept running, so that when he showed up in front of the Capitol building and was surrounded by Lincoln police and U.S. Marshals, he had a gun in his hand. The police told him to drop the gun. He did not drop the gun. And 2 officers opened fire on him, hitting him 3 times. 2 went through his right buttocks, and the 3rd traveled up through his body, broke his pelvis, damaged his liver, and collapsed his lung. He survived. So in the grand scheme of American gun violence, this isn't even one of the 38,000 that result in death every year. This is one of the 100,000 plus that don't, right? So they quickly, it may not have even made the Omaha news, right? So let's look at this particular case a little more closely. I'm interested in how the gun was made, sold, and ended up in the hands of an 18-year-old African-American kid who took 3 bullets, right? And I want to just say, like, none of us should be surprised if you have a gun in your hand and the police tell you to drop the gun. You're probably not even going to incur the highest levels of sympathy among people who are worried about police violence, right? I mean, he did have a gun in his hand, so it's hardly surprising that the police responded the way that they did. Can you flip to the next one, please, Molly? So let's think through the kind of food chain, right, that led to Tariq Ortiz. Who benefits from it? Who gets punished by it? At the top of this food chain, I've placed manufacturers, firearm manufacturers.
Can you name some names?
Of
manufacturers?
Well, sure. There's Smith & Wesson, Ruger, Glock. In this case, it was Regent Arms, which is an imported German company, Bushmaster, Colt, Winchester, and there's tons of them, right? Manufacturers are not bound by many federal regulations in the United States. So you can't sell automatic weapons, right? The kind of actual machine guns where holding the trigger down deploys a constant stream of bullets. And you can't sell those without really high, you have to go through an FBI process to be able to have access to an automatic weapon. And you can't sell some accessories like, say, silencers. Although the NRA wants to change that. We're trying to legalize silencers as we speak. So manufacturers are by and large allowed almost entirely free rein as far as what they want to manufacture and sell and in what quantities into the US market. Right underneath manufacturers, I kind of want to join these together, are firearm dealers. There are different kinds of dealers, but the ones I want to talk about right now would be what we call federally licensed firearm dealers. So those are people who are the kind of point of sale between the manufacturer and sale to the public, as opposed to, say, if I sold you a handgun that I had already purchased, right? Just kind of like the used market. If you want to be a licensed firearm dealer in the United States, you need to pass a background check and meet zoning requirements, which are often little to non-existent in a lot of US states. So you get checked out as an individual before you're allowed to have that license. But once you have that license, there are no anti-theft requirements. So you can own a gun store or sell them maybe out of your home. The federal government has no legal requirements that you take any particular precautions to keep them guarded from theft. So one of the ways that guns leak into the so-called criminal market is through negligent storage, right, at the sale end. A lot of people will take anti-theft precautions because they don't want their stuff stolen, right? But they're not legally required to. There's no requirement at the federal level about selling them to, say, people in clear distress. You don't have to require a waiting period if you think that there's something that is off-putting about someone who wants to purchase a firearm from you. And there are no restrictions on the quantity of firearms that you can sell, right? So in a lot of other industries, if there's a convenience store set up next to a middle school and that convenience store is selling 3 times the number of cigarettes that the one a few blocks away is selling, they'll attract the scrutiny of the law, right? What are you doing? Are you selling cigarettes to middle school kids, right? Are you IDing people? There isn't the same scrutiny brought to firearms sellers. And in fact, both manufacturers and sellers of firearms are protected by a particular federal law, slide girl, called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA. For some reason, it's pronounced PLACA, which I find as an English professor annoying. It should be like PLACA, but it's PLACA. Okay. So the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act was signed into federal law in 2005. And it is an unparalleled shield of the firearm industry that protects manufacturers and sellers of firearms from civil lawsuits in ways that no other industry in the United States enjoys. So the way that this works in the United States, right, is that if somebody is selling a face mask at the beauty counter that has, arsenic in it, and people are regularly dying from arsenic, you get to sue that person out of existence, right? They have to make it right. Well, there are certain protections put in place to shield gun makers and gun sellers from similar lawsuits. You are still allowed to sell or to sue a firearm company for certain kinds of negligence, like if their product does not work, but you cannot sue them for the completely predictable kinds of damage that pumping their product into our communities result in. So the way that I like to explain it is that if you have a handgun that has a well-known reputation for firing when dropped, or having such an easy trigger pull that kids keep shooting each other with it by accident in homes. You cannot sue a gun maker for those issues. But if you cannot shoot your gun, you get to sue them. Okay. So ever since PLACA was signed into law in 2005, that's 13 years ago, approximately 400,000 people in the United States have died by gun.
Wow.
Of those 400,000 deaths, there has only been one lawsuit that resulted in a verdict of negligence. And that was a case in Milwaukee where what's called a bad apple gun dealer was selling something like 3,000 handguns per year, was well known by the police and community to be wantonly selling kind of straw purchase guns into the community, and they were caught doing this. They were caught letting one guy clearly buy a gun for a companion he had brought into the store, and they were sort of like discussing how it was really for this guy right in front of the manager of the store. The guy who got the gun then used it to shoot 2 police officers who were horribly wounded by the shooting, and it was them who won a verdict against Badger Arms in Milwaukee. And that is the single negligence lawsuit that has resulted in damages against a firearm seller or manufacturer in 13 years and 400,000 gun deaths. This is a cue that the firearm industry took directly from tobacco, right? So guns looked at what was happening to tobacco. Like, oh no, they're getting their butts sued off by people who are suffering the damages of their product. And the other thing that was happening is that little communities all over the country were passing ordinances saying you can't smoke in bars or restaurants in their town, and then it would trickle up and have the effect of seriously curtailing cigarette purchases. So the NRA jumped in on that really early. They said, we want this law to keep us from getting sued, and we want preemption laws passed all over the country that keep communities from regulating firearms. And they've been almost entirely successful in both of those. So, of the 11 million or so guns per year that are sold into American homes, one of them was a Regent Arms handgun that eventually ended up at Nebraska Gun in downtown Lincoln. And that would be the one that Tariq Ortiz had in his hand the day that he was shot by police in front of the Capitol. Before we get to an interesting step in that purchase process, I want to go to the next step in my food chain. Can you go one more there? Legal buyers. So if you follow news about gun violence closely, you've probably heard this recurring phrase, right, that gets used a lot, the law-abiding gun owner. Does this sound like a familiar term to you? As somebody who's interested in language and texts, early on in gun activism, there's something about that phrase, the way it gets used all the time, right? The way that I'm a law-abiding gun owner, I don't need this or that. So I think I like to think about that in this kind of food chain, precisely because there are so few laws that law-abiding gun owners have to abide. So, you know, if you have an industry that has essentially wiped out almost all laws that you're required to abide, what does it mean to pride oneself on being a law-abiding gun owner, right? It doesn't mean a whole lot. So on the federal level, there's not a whole lot of laws determining what makes a law-abiding gun owner. Can you flip to the next one, Millie? There's a list of prohibited persons. So if you want to purchase a firearm from a federally licensed firearm dealer, you cannot be any of the people on this list. Okay. Felon, fugitive, illegal drug user, adjudicated mentally defective, an illegal immigrant, dishonorably discharged, renounced your citizenship, under a current domestic violence protection order, or convicted of domestic violence offense. Some of these are no-brainers, right? That we want to exclude these people from firearm ownership. Some of them, I contend, function more as racial filters. So in the context of Return to Michelle Alexander, of a war on drugs, right, that disproportionately focuses the power of the justice system on black and brown people to exclude felons as opposed to, say, violent crimes of any sort, functions as a disproportionate racial filter that helps mark legal gun ownership as white gun ownership. I would argue something similar happens with the illegal immigrant category. So when you have a case where estimates on this vary, there's not really good data collection on it, but one of the oft-cited numbers is something like 1 in 6 black men in America will spend time in incarceration in their lifetime. To have a blanket prohibition on felons becomes a racially charged category, right? And I argue that what that essentially does is it inflects the way that we think of people who display firearms in public, right? So if, you know, I don't think I have to make an argument to this crowd about like the way that race and racial bias colors how we interact with people in public, right, and how a lot of you know, unfortunate things in our society have unfolded. It means something culturally differently to be a black man who has a handgun on his hip in a country that views standing in Starbucks waiting for your friend as something that requires the police state to intervene with, right, and being a white man with a gun on your hip. You don't have to look at the news for very long to see how this kind of thing plays out. Tamir Rice was a little boy a year younger than my daughter when he stood with a perfectly legal toy gun at a park in Cleveland. Police pulled up in front of him, and within 3 seconds of arrival, they had shot the boy and fallen to the ground, and they waited without assisting him as he bled out. John Crawford was a black man in Ohio, also I believe, who went into Walmart to buy an airsoft rifle. He picked the gun up that was for sale, the toy gun up that was for sale in that store, and as he walked through the aisles with it, the police arrived and shot him dead. Philando Castile was a licensed concealed carry handgun owner in the Minneapolis area 2 years ago, who was pulled over at a routine traffic stop. He did what he was supposed to do, and he told the officer at the window, hey, I want you to know I'm a concealed carrier and I have a handgun in the car, and he was shot dead in front of his girlfriend and a 4-year-old girl in the back seat, who then started crying that they were going to shoot her mommy too. So what I see in this list of prohibited persons are lots of things that make sense, and some things that maybe have some, you know, benefit to them, that have a strong cost as far as racism goes, also in helping to structure at the federal level gun ownership as a marker of white citizenship. Right? Okay, Nellie, can you look through? Okay. What we don't have at the federal level are laws saying things like you have to get some training before you own a firearm. You have to prove that you can see. We don't have anything excluding people with alcohol-related convictions, which is the single best indicator of firearm violence, is a history of alcohol abuse. We don't have anything saying that if you have a handgun in a home with a minor child, you have to store that in certain ways to prevent accidental shootings, suicide, school shootings. None of those things. And even at the state level, few of those laws exist. There's only one state, Massachusetts, that requires guns to be locked when they're not in use. And there's only a handful of them that have something like child safe storage laws. And that's something we're pushing for in Lincoln right now, as an ordinance that would require that kind of thing. So, additional laws at the state level further empower this kind of racial divide, right? So we don't have laws that are actually enforcing responsibility, but we do have laws that are enforcing certain kinds of racial categories. negligent shootings are not evenly prosecuted. And the handgun that Tariq Ortiz had was actually purchased legally by a 23-year-old white man in Lincoln named Christian Biggerstaff, who later told the police that he purchased the handgun and then decided to keep it indefinitely in his mother's car. And his mother freely told the police that she routinely drove the car around Lincoln and left it unlocked when she went into places. This is against the law in Lincoln, but no one was prosecuted. So, up to this point in our handguns travels, we've had what I call a wide open spigot at the manufacturer level, at the seller level, and even at the legal buyer level, where nobody has had to face any true accountability for the fact that they are a vector for weapons designed to kill entering into American homes and communities. All of that radically changes right here at the street level. Suddenly, when we're looking at an 18-year-old black kid who has his hands on a gun, the full force of the police state and the justice system rain down on his head. Right? And I mean, you know, I'm not defending the choices that he partook of that day, right? But I'm going to go through this last part a little fast, but with the increased militarization of American police departments, so SWAT teams, for example, they were initially implemented. They were meant to be rarely used tools for hostage kinds of situations. Now the ACLU has determined that 80% of SWAT raids are to deliver arrest warrants, typically for low-level drug offenses. Guns are found in only 35% of homes where those warrants are delivered. So what we tend to do then, from this kind of biopolitical bird's eye view, is view gun violence as this street-level, racially inflected black issue, right? Even though the only reason it gets there is through these wide-open kind of conduits. And then we use that as its own justification for selling even more guns, right? Well, oh, if these scary people have guns and they're coming after us, we need to buy more guns, we need to pay tax money to buy our police guns, and we need to essentially authorize police force to use lethal weapons and lethal force whenever they might fear that there's a gun present in the situation, right? And finally, when it comes to the prosecution of gun crimes, which is essentially precluded by the law up to this point, right? When it comes to the prosecution of gun crimes, if you look at the, yeah, go ahead, Amelia. If you look at the manual of the United States Attorney's Office, I mean, they jump right into this as a recent study of gang members, right? Let's just get to the next one real quick. I'm going to show. Firearms violations should be aggressively used in prosecuting violent crime. They are generally simple and quick to prove. The mandatory and enhanced punishments for many firearms violations can be used to leverage to gain plea bargaining and cooperation from offenders. Having a handgun present when you're dealing pot can add 10 years onto a sentence. Not 10 years for the person who made them, sold them with abandoned, allowed their store to be robbed numerous times. In Lincoln, holds a shooting range right next to a preschool so that the kids can't go outside and play anymore because of stray bullets that they're afraid of. No prison time for the people who store a handgun illegally in their car until it gets stolen, right? It's not until it comes down the pipe into the hands of someone who had some drugs in his pocket that we tack on these massive punishments. And so in the case of Tariq Ortiz, a week or two after he was shot, he recovered enough to be brought into the courtroom in a wheelchair with his legs shackled together, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 15 years in prison. So the reason I wanted to take a look at that local case that probably flew under everyone's radar is because it's just so typical and so indicative of the way that we ignore people who profit the most off of gun violence and direct the full force and violence of the law onto the most vulnerable people who have the least powers over how violence, kind of on a structural level, is created in our society. So I think that's my last slide. You know, with Nebraskans Against Gun Violence, this is the way that we like to approach our thinking about gun violence. We're not interested in helping senators who are trying to push through more punitive add-on sentences to kids, which is what we just saw last session. We're not interested in illegalizing toy guns, unless it means that you imprison the people who made them, not the kid who carries it at the park, right? So this is sort of how our thinking has gone, and as we go into election years, one of the things we're really pushing for is that we want to hear local politicians say that they're going to support laws like safe storage laws that require people at the legal purchase level to be actually responsible with their firearms. And at the federal level, we want long-term, over the next several years, to see a repeal of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, and let that, you know, capitalism sort this out the way it's supposed to, right? Let the people that ruin lives have to pay for the damage they produce. And I'm happy to chat or answer questions if we have a minute.
Are there chapters in Omaha of this?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have what we would actually call chapters, but we have members in Omaha. And what we would really like are people in Omaha to help us get that kind of structure, where we can actually have a chapter, you know, with that kind of level of organization. What we tend to do is just hold meetings and bounce back and forth between Lincoln and Omaha.
Okay, because I teach at college level, and these students, this is the hot button issue for a lot of them. They're looking for a place to step in, and I'm just wondering what's the structure?
Yeah, the answer is we don't have a lot of structure.
All right, do you have a card or something?
Yeah, I'll give you my information, but we want more structure. What we, like I said, what we tend to do is we tend to call meetings, and whoever wants to come, but I'd like us to get into more of a routine. This location holds a meeting in their chapter, this location, a lot like Nebraskans Against Gun Violence does. Yeah.
Do you have a web page or?
Yep, NAGV.org.
Say it again?
NAGV, Nebraskans Against Gun Violence.org.
And then a Facebook page too?
Yeah, and we have a very active Facebook page, and we have a Facebook discussion group with about 700 Nebraskans in it, where we have active conversations about this stuff. Oh, yes?
Are there any current public officials that have listened to you talk and are starting to awaken to the ideas of, you know, I guess it's probably, but...
Yeah,
Repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. She was asking whether there are any public officials who are listening, basically. Certainly at a national level there are. Locally in Lincoln, we just unanimously passed a bump stock ban. Unanimously. It's pretty amazing. In Lincoln, Nebraska. So we have city officials that, I mean, I like that ban. I don't think it's going to do a lot for, you know, most gun violence has nothing to do with bump stocks, but at the state level, you know, we have the kind of predictable people. Patty Pansing-Brooks has been a champ. You know, she's all over this issue of gun violence, and we have some others who are supportive. But I think the more important thing that we've seen is a slow shift where you have reasonable moderates or people who are just kind of worried about their reputation back home being reluctant to be totally gung-ho pro-NRA. So that just because the NRA is endorsing a bill does not mean you are going to get everybody signing on to it at the Nebraska Union Cameral. And so that's one of the things I have seen that's been really refreshing is that I think they're losing their power to get automatic votes just because they're putting forth a gun bill. Yeah.
How do the communities, those who are illegal, how do they get guns? Who do they buy it from?
Yeah.
There's too many guns in communities they should have. Probably they're illegal.
Yeah, I mean...
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. The question was, basically, where do the illegal guns come from? When you have more guns than people, I mean, that's what we have right now in the United States. There are more guns in homes than there are people who live in the United States. It's just not hard to get a gun. Because especially when you have, it's so easy to buy them. All you have to do is find someone who's of legal age. If you have a friend who just turned 21 and has a clean record, take them to the gun store and they have a handgun in 10 minutes, right? And they can just give it to you. Private sales are even easier, especially in other states. Nebraska is a little better than some other states with private sales. But also when there's absolutely no requirements for guns to be stored in a responsible way, it's just really super easy for people to steal guns. Lincoln, there are something like 200 guns stolen every year in Lincoln out of cars. And they don't prosecute the people who report them because they don't want to discourage reporting. But I bet you $1 million they'll prosecute people who stole it. I'm not even saying they shouldn't, but it's just that up until that point of the gun being in the hand illegally, we don't care about gun violence. It's only when it's this punitive hammer we can keep beating down, right, the kind of lowest ranks of society that we really care about gun violence. But yeah, the answer is like, people, you don't even have to be told to keep your gun locked up when you buy a gun. So they're just everywhere. We're awash in them. Yeah.
I will say that I'm a member of a small church in the Black community, and a member of our church who's involved in working with young women to try to help them build better self-esteem so they will quit being the straw buyers.
That's right.
Or their felon boy, ex-felon boy.
Yeah, one of the really cool campaigns, what she said was working with young women and educating them and teaching them self-esteem so that they will not be straw purchasers, right, for boyfriends. There's been a really cool campaign to put educational materials about that in like hair salons. You target the places where young women go, and you're like, hey, don't be stupid, don't buy a gun for your boyfriend, because you're going to prison if he uses it to kill somebody with. Right? So I think that's a really great initiative. I still want to see us aim higher. Right? I want us to go after the lobbyists and the manufacturers, because, you know, the reason I like the image of the spigot is that if your basement is flooding and you're standing there with a tablespoon scooping the water out, you go turn off the damn spigot. Right? And that's what we need to do.
I get concerned about gun violence on the police end. Are they hiring different kinds of people, like maybe ex-military people who are trained to shoot to kill? Are they police departments changing their training to go out and shoot and kill anybody that's...
I think it's that second.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Her question is, why are what's the deal with all this police violence? Are they hiring people who are particularly inclined to shoot, or is it something about the training? A part of it is I think we're just paying more attention than we used to, but my understanding is that more and more police departments are outsourcing their kind of like crisis training to outside agencies, where what they're teaching is this kind of like protect yourself above all else kind of approach. Approach every situation as a potential lethal interaction for you, the officer, and respond accordingly. And so you get dead kids in parks, dead guys in Walmart who are just picking up a product off the shelf. And so if I had to pick the main offender, I would say it's the training that's going on right now. Yeah.
How would you respond if I perceive myself as a law-abiding gun owner, and I would say, I'm a law-abiding gun owner, I hunt and shoot animals, I keep the gun locked up when not using it, I do not threaten people with it.
I'm not sure what you...
Would you say that I'm racist?
Oh, I would say that any money you give to the gun industry is promoting what I just described. Chris Cox makes about 10 cents off of every firearm purchase in the United States. I will fully admit I am about as far to the left on guns as you can get. More to the left than other people in my organization. At some point, I don't really know that it's relevant because we're not at risk for my opinion being the law of the land in the United States. Let me know when we're actually about to ban all guns and, we can have a debate. But I don't believe that it's possible to be a truly responsible consumer of firearms in a country where the money from those gun purchases goes to the maintaining of the situation I just described. It might be 100 years ago, it might be if we get rid of PLACA, we diminish the NRA, we do all that, you can go buy your rifle and none of it goes into this kind of central pot, that we might have a different situation. And I also do, obviously I understand that some people need firearms for their survival, if you have a farm and that kind of thing, but it's a thoroughly corrupt industry. Yeah.
How many of these arms dealers are connected to, like, military munitions, guns and bazookas and all that kind of thing?
That's a good question. It's something I'm starting to look into, but I can't give you a great answer to it now. Here in Nebraska, we have a an ammunition manufacturing company called Hornady. They're in Grand Island. The owner of that company is on the board, the national board of the National Rifle Association. Go check them out. They sell guns. One thing they do, they sell law enforcement ammunition. They sell bullets specifically designed to blow open the head of elephants. So on their website, they are proud to boast hunting videos of elephants getting their heads blown open. This is coming right here in our backyard. And I did a little research. Somebody asked me, who lives in Grand Island, how many people have died from those bullets? It's like, well, there's no way we can trace that. But if I Google around, I came up with a good list. All of these dead women with Hornady bullets in their bodies, right? But I don't know. I mean, to answer your question, I get back to me in a month.
I'll give you my email.
Good, thank you. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut off questions because it's already 8 o'clock. Thank you, Amanda. Nebraskans Against Gun Violence, please come up and she'll share her information. And I lost my glasses on here and I cannot do anything without them anymore.
I stole them. I should.
So, right now I would like to introduce Tim Renna, the Nebraska State Coordinator for Nebraskans for Peace, to announce whatever he's going to announce.
Tim is running for president.
Yeah.
You're wrong, Jerry. I don't want the job. Folks, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I have been the state coordinator of Nebraskans for Peace for now 25 years. That's over half as long as Nebraskans for Peace is even old. Right? Wow. And I've been around this long. So I can speak with a certain amount of authority when I can guarantee to you that there is no other meeting like this going on in Nebraska tonight. All right? This is the only meeting of this nature that is happening across the entire state. And the fact that you chose to spend your evening with us for an intense discussion about how we create a more peaceful and just world is a tribute to you, and I thank you for it. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your energy. I thank you for your money. Because here's the other thing, is that you knew that this was a fundraiser when you came here tonight, okay? And yet you still showed up. This is a tribute to you. I want to tell you just two quick things here, and then I'm going to give you the total for how much money we raised. When Nebraskans for Peace was formed in 1970, we had, over the next 18 to 24 months, like 1,000 members. Almost half a century later, we have 1,000 members. Now they've changed, okay? All right, the baton has been passed a little bit, all right? But not everybody in Nebraska wants to be involved in a peace organization. It's sad, it's unfortunate, it's a fact. And yet, look what this small band of people can do. We don't have to have everybody. As we said in the fundraising letter that we sent out this year, 3% of the American public was involved in the civil rights movement. 3% of the American public was actively involved in stopping the war in Vietnam. It would be great if we had everybody. It would be magnificent if we had everybody. It would be better if we had everybody. But to stand up for peace, to stand up for justice, and to make change, we don't have to have everybody. What we have to have is a committed core of people who will come out on a Saturday night to a meeting where they're going to be hit up for money, and they will show up anyway. Thank you for doing this. The fact that you are here tonight is a tribute to you, and it's why a year from now we will be back doing the very same thing all over again, because this is what people like you with this kind of DNA do with your time. And if you didn't do it, we wouldn't exist. So hang around in 2020. We're going to be 50. It'll be a big party. You'll want to be there. And tonight, you helped us raise $5,264.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. All right, here. We're going to have some time for community announcements now. And we're going to have anybody who wants to make an announcement to come up and use the microphone for 1 minute or less, please, because we're running out of time. Thank you. You can line up over here to speak.
Hi, I'd like to invite everybody to come out to court hearings that will be upcoming in the Zachary Bear Hills court case. I want you to know that the last year we have been at every court hearing, even if it lasted for 2 minutes. A group of us were there, and the press conference that followed took place for about 30 minutes. We were on all 3 stations, so it's worth it. And the Zachary Bear Hills case is very interesting because it truly has everything. It has race, it has disparity of justice, gender, mental illness issues, everything. So if anybody wants to write a book about the state of the justice system, you might come out and get to know some of the Native American people. Thank you.
If you have time before you leave, if you'd walk over here and view these 6 freestanding billboards. They're double-sided. They're shipped from the Jewish Museum on the Palestinian Experience. They're varied. They cover all kinds of topics about the Palestinian and Israeli experience. And if you know of any place where you could suggest to me where else these could be displayed, please let me know, like your church or your civic organization or some other place, because we could get more mileage out of these 6 posters. Thank you.
Hi. The Omaha Peace and Justice Expo rides again. Coming July 21st, we'll be on the UNO campus for the afternoon. It's a Saturday afternoon. And so we're trying to be a collection of every peace and justice effort that's going on in the community. So if you know one that needs to be there, please give them a flyer, because they can connect with us. If this year, instead of one keynote speaker, what we're doing is we're getting multiple speakers who will share the time. We're going to have one from the different communities, 6 different communities: women, blacks, LGBT, students, Native American, and immigrants, and DACA. So I think it's going to be an awesome event. If you want to help spread the word, we want to give everybody a flyer. We want you to remember it's happening. We've got lots of flyers. You can even hand out flyers. You can volunteer for us. You can tell organizations to be there. You can help spread the word, even if you can't be there. And so maybe we can help get Nebraskans Against Gun Violence quantum, let's see, what is it called? Critical mass, so that they can make something happen. So, thank you.
Real quick announcement about the political. Catholic Democrats of Nebraska, which has existed as a caucus within the Democratic Party, is changing to the Interfaith Democrats of Nebraska. And our first meeting will be at the state convention in Lincoln that first weekend in June. So if you are going to be there, or if you know somebody who's going to be there, tell them, let their ears perk up a little bit and see if they would like to attend that caucus meeting, because we're going to need people to volunteer to do things like be the administrator. Well, we'll have more than one administrator on our page. Our page will have a Catholic administrator, a Methodist administrator, whatever, however many people want to be posting articles from their faith that are justice and peace oriented, not just snide political things. We keep away from that. We go high when they go low. So that's the Interfaith Democrats of Nebraska.
My name is Mary Spurgeon. I work with Omaha Together One Community's Medicaid Expansion Action Team, and we are preparing presentations to tell groups about what Medicaid expansion, why we think it's a good thing, what it will do for the state and for individuals in the state. So we're going to be getting the word out ever more to our own institutions, but if you know of groups who would like to have such a presentation, we think it's going to be about 30-35 minutes. Let us know. We'll try and work you in. We'd love to do that.
Thank you all for coming. The meeting is officially over. Please take your plates to the garbage. Or do we have another announcement? No, just making an announcement. Take your plates to the garbage or to the back open window over there. Thanks again for being here. Don't forget to take the dish that you came with. Thank you. Have a good night.